you. We'll do the refuge prayer 3 times to begin. Sanjay Chodang Tsoki Chodnam La Changjot Bardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Jinso Kepe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sanjay Drupar Shok Sanjay Chodang Soki Sokna La Jangja Bardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Jinso Kepe Sona Ki Drola Panchir Sanjay Drupar Shok Sanjay Chodang Soki Chodna La Jangja Bardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Jinso Kepe Sonam Ki Drola Panchir Sanjay Drupar Shok. Well, good morning. It's nice to see such a busy place. This is such a wonderful facility, and you have so many people here working hard that have made this possible and that are making it possible. And so it's just great to see people taking advantage of this. It's a rare, quite honestly, it's a rare situation that you have here. With the facility, the teachers, there's a lot of people working together and so forth. So you're very, very fortunate. Now, I'm going to find my talk, if I can. Let's see here. Yes. Today's talk, I am going to talk about forgiveness. And now that might seem a little strange for Tibetan Buddhism because a lot of times they don't talk about it. But I'm going to use some of the teachings in The Heart is Noble by Gyalwang Karmapa. And I figure if he talks about it, I can talk about it too. So I'm going to start with this. Patience is the wisdom that allows us to be accommodating. That's a very simple quote. That patience is the, quote, active application of wise reasoning in order to intentionally dissolve any resentments we might harbor towards others. And I'm going to tomorrow kind of glean some of these quotes that I've been reading and put them together in a document and send them to somebody probably right over there with the little green on her hands. Are you Irish? Just joking. So anyway, The idea is that we can develop patience, we can develop more wisdom, and it's workable. So then he goes into, this is a great little heading. This section of the chapter is titled Parting with Faults, which is really important, to part with our faults. So we all make mistakes. We all come under the influence of strong emotions, and we need to find ways of working with our mistakes, constructive ways to work with our mistakes. Now, I like woodworking. I like to build things. I made, at my center, I made the puja tables. And one thing that I learned pretty quickly, and I didn't have to learn it on my own, that this is kind of a saying among woodworkers, that an amateur, when they make a mistake, they give up. A professional works with their mistakes. So Buddhists work with their mistakes. You don't say, okay, I give up, I can't do it. We can work with our mistakes. And forgiveness is a way of working with our mistakes. It gives us room to grow. Because that's what we need to do, is we need to grow. And we all come into, under the control of strong emotions. We're not blameless. And by ignoring our faults, that doesn't get us anywhere. It just keeps us stuck in the same place, and we don't want to be stuck. We want to have some movement here. So a healthy relationship with ourselves as well as with other people comes from identifying our faults and transforming them, working with our faults. And I've done a lot of woodworking, all kinds of different things that I've made out of wood. And I could, if you want to come over to my place, I could point out a fault with just about every one of them. I'm not perfect, even if it might look perfect to you. So we don't have to be perfect. We just have to do the best that we can and have the aspiration to improve, and then do things that help us work on improving. So the thing is that we want to be aware of our faults, and one of the pitfalls is to, when you look at your faults, solidify them and think, well, this is just the way I am, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So if we can forgive ourselves, forgive others, it's a powerful tool for change. And confession is a very useful tool in parting with faults. And it is good to have a personal practice relating to confession. Here is a quote from the Karmapa. For example, if we have lied, confessing could involve openly disclosing what we have done, acknowledging that we recognize that it was wrong. Doesn't have to be a formal prayer. It would just be recognizing it yourself. And what he says then is you can confess to an actual person, like a lama, or you could visualize a person in front of you. It could be a lama, it could be karmapa, it could even be a friend. He says you could even go out in nature. Now, this book was a talk to Western students that came over to India for a seminar. So this was given to people that really were not, many of them were not practicing Buddhists. So I would recommend not going out to a tree and confessing to a tree. Maybe if you're pagan. But, visualize the Buddha, visualize Karmapa, visualize me, Kempo, some of the Kenpos at KTD, but someone that you feel is above you. Visualize them in front of you, and then have regret for what you have done. I talk about the 4 R's. When you're in school, you talk about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I talk about the 4 R's. Reliance on a being that's above you, regret for your action versus guilt. Guilt is, I'm a bad person, I keep screwing up, da. You're the amateur, and then you kind of give up and you just beat yourself. Why can't I do this? That's guilt. And guilt is just another afflictive state of mind. It's absolutely not helpful. It's harmful. It's confusion. So regret, then the remedy is that generate this feeling that this was wrong, that you don't want to do it again. And it can be as simple as just in your own words saying, this is what I did, I regret it, I don't want to do it again. Or there are simple confession prayers. If you go to Lama Kathy's website, she has some good things you can download about confession. And there are longer confession prayers too. When you get into Nundro, there is the Vajrasattva practice. We've got lots of different confession prayers. We got your back covered, and your front covered too. Take your pick. But so recite a remedy of some kind. And then the 4th R is resolve, which is resolve not to do it again. And this is different than a New Year's resolution. We know what a New Year's resolution is, and 3 days later you got a drink in your hand. It's a serious commitment that I'm not going to do it again. And since it's probably a habit, you will do it again, and then you do another confession, as opposed to just drop it. This doesn't work. I am the way I am. I was born this way. I can't do anything about it. I think there's some rock and roll songs about that. We're not going to go into that. Anyway, Then this is this idea of a fresh start. That, you put this behind you, now let's start fresh. This is where there's this huge difference between guilt and remorse. Put it behind you. You don't have to beat yourself up anymore about how you always are doing bad things and making mistakes and screwing up. Let's start a fresh start. And realize that our actions don't define who we are. We're not the sum of the best things we've done in our lives, or the best things other people think we have done in our lives, or the worst things that we've done in our lives, or the worst things that other people think we have done in our lives. All of this, our Buddha nature is way beyond all of that. Our potential is just way beyond all of that. So this has to be done with sincerity and heartfelt if it's going to work. So in a way, what you put into it is very, very important, because that will determine what you get out of it. Now, once this is done, you don't have to revisit it unless it comes up again. But if you really do it seriously, if it comes up again, it's like, well, I've already taken care of this. There's a saying that probably you don't know, maybe you never heard. It's called, there's no point in beating a dead horse. Well, this is taken care of. It's done. It's history. So you need to realize the difference between the past, the present, and the future. You confess in the present what you did in the past, so there's room to grow in the future. And if you don't separate the past from the present, there's no future. You're living in the past. So that's a little bit about forgiving ourselves. Now the next is forgiving others. And the first point is that if you don't know how to forgive yourself, how can you forgive others? If any of you can answer that question, how do you forgive others when you can't forgive? When it comes to the Q&A, please explain it to me. So this doesn't mean that you condone the behavior of others. It, quote, means that you want to help create a future in which they no longer behave that way. So this is not just saying, walk all over me, treat me like a piece of, you fill in the blank. This is being recorded. Distinguish between the person's harmful behavior and the person. Karmapa uses the example of being beaten by a stick. And it's not the stick that's the problem, it's the hand that's holding the stick that's the problem. And what is causing the person to act in that way is the kleshas, their anger or their passion, or, well, the third main one is ignorance, but there's also arrogance, and there's jealousy. all of those things can cause friction between you and other people. So, and it's good to understand that these emotions are the problem, that the person is under the control of these emotions, and that maybe at times this person behaves more sanely. Maybe not with you, but maybe with somebody else. And that finally that the person is harming themselves karmically as well as harming you. And quite honestly, I've talked about this yesterday and the day before, that my mother was sexually assaulted repeatedly in her home as a little girl. And she had very severe problems. When I was young, I didn't realize how disturbed she was. I don't know if she was mentally ill when I was young, but definitely by the time I was 16, it became obvious that she was mentally ill. And I remember her saying this to me as she is absolutely hysterical, in a frenzy, whipping me with a leather belt as hard as she can, going, "I'm doing this because I love you." And so there was this element of possession and love. I mean, if this isn't afflictive emotions controlling the belt, I don't know what is. I eventually realized that she was a bit like a family dog that loved the family, but it had run out into the road, got hit by a car. Now it's in extreme pain. And if you're going to help that dog, you have to muzzle it, because it will bite you, because it's in such pain. I had to get much older and get involved in Buddhism before I could get to that point. But if you can start looking at these people, that they're in immense pain when they do some of these things that we then hold against them. Well, of course, as a child, I couldn't put a muzzle on my mother. It just, it doesn't work. But, and you can't do that in the office either. I guarantee, do not try this in the office. But if you can start thinking about these troublemakers being in a lot of pain, that maybe you can back off a little bit and eventually develop a little wisdom if you can forgive and kind of drop your anger towards them. So it's good to at least think, may they be free of suffering. May they not create all this future suffering for them by their actions. Because when they behave this way, unless you've got a big ego and they're really behaving normally and they're stepping on your ego, that could be happening too. But anyway, the idea is to let go, wish them to be free of suffering, realize that they are creating more suffering from themselves. And here is another quote of Karmapa: shifting your concern from your own well-being to include a genuine concern for the other person can transform your relationship and can also transform you as a person. Now you can become a person that creates well-being for other people instead of resentment, anger, and so forth. And this, of course, makes the relationship healthier. And also realize that you're not Buddha and that you may, I looked at it this way, to change a little bit. I was a prison chaplain, and I looked at part of what I did as planting seeds that may not sprout until a future lifetime. And so remember that your relationship is deep, and you can do things that can benefit another person that they may not have any noticeable benefit until another lifetime. And then maybe 50 years from here they show up. Who knows? But, think about that we get so involved in immediate results. We like fast food and so forth. We want things to happen now. High speeds on the highway. Get road construction and what's going on here. There's a bigger picture. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so if you can forgive the other person, it also takes a lot of load off of your shoulder. Because when you are holding on to a grudge, when you're angry, you can't be happy. It's impossible to be happy. You just keep going over it over and over again. Yesterday, I think it was, I mentioned that when I took refuge, Rinpoche gave me the name Diligent Loving Kindness. And it was turned out because I had been suffering from depression, and that a part of depression is anger towards yourself. And the Hinayana, you're working with reducing your own suffering. And another element of depression is laziness, and diligence is the remedy for laziness. Well, now it came time for me to take bodhisattva vows. And that's when you're vowing to work for others. And when it came to get a name card, this is what he said. We haven't gotten the name cards back from the printer, so your refuge name is your bodhisattva name. Now I've got to be diligent and kind to other people. That Rinpoche, he just has a way of kind of nailing you. So it's 12 o'clock rather, and I could go into this in more detail, but are there any questions?
We have 2 question microphones. Feel welcome to get in line.
Yeah, get in line.
And if you want to line up behind me, can do as well. This way we can hear better.
Yeah, having it recorded is important.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I know you were asking actually a rhetorical question. How can you forgive others when you can't forgive ourselves? But I'm actually going to give you a serious answer. For many individuals, sometimes we have a habit of being completely blind in our actions and our feelings, and We don't acknowledge them very well. And so we tend to be a lot more reactive if something happens. We tend to get really hard on ourselves, and we tend to focus on those mistakes because we see those as moral failings. We see those as aspects of shame. How could I have said this? How can you have done this? What is wrong with you? This is not just a mistake. This was a simple mistake. You should know better. It's, as a woodworker, it's the whole adage of measure twice, cut once. You should know that you shouldn't just take a quick measurement and cut the leg. Oh, great, now the leg's uneven. It's a boneheaded thing to do. So we get really hard on ourselves. We notice all of these things and all of that. So we don't forgive ourselves because we don't see the need to. But for others, especially those that we love and hold deep bonds and relationships with, it hurts. It hurts differently because we don't notice our pain. We don't notice the damage to ourselves. But when someone you love says something hurtful to you, you feel it. And suddenly you wrestle with it, and then you acknowledge and forgive the person so they may become a better person and not continue the harm. Meanwhile, we're stabbing ourselves in the chest because we don't feel it.
Yes.
And this is something I feel like honestly telling you as someone who suffers a dissociation disorder and other mental illnesses. Sometimes I don't realize that I'm cutting myself apart until someone grabs my wrist and says, "You're bleeding." And I think sometimes you need that somebody to take your arms and say, "Look at you, you're bleeding."
Yes. Okay, well, the first thing that came to mind was this little handout that we did yesterday. Why did you come up here? I'm going to give you this. Homework. Yes, I like that. Homework. Yeah. Yeah, and I did this yesterday, but it's a little Tonglen exercise. I call it jailbreak. And it's how to break out of this little jail that we live in of self-loathing, self-hate, and so forth. And it's true. Many people just live in another way to put it, a box. And it's a secure box because we know every little inch of this little box. And it is self-hate, loathing, and so forth. And it's familiar pain, and familiar pain is much better than fear of something new. So, study that and then go ahead and try practicing it. It's Tonglen. When I go, are there any more questions? Yeah, go right ahead.
Good morning, afternoon. What role do consequences play in moving past glaciers and also not perpetrating suffering onto other people or people we love?
You'll have to excuse me. I didn't hear everything you said.
So, hey, that is some 58's live. What role do consequences play in removing negative afflictive states or kleshas, both concerning ourselves, as in the case that you just gave with the Tonglen and the jail, and or any other afflictive states like shame, that and what we perpetrate onto other people.
Yeah. Now this is what I heard. Yes, what will the consequences be of removing our own kleshas, and then working with the kleshas of others? And that's what I heard. I'm sorry, but I'm not hearing everything that you're saying.
Oh, consequences. What role do consequences have in what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I think what you're trying to say is that in society and in relationships, frequently negative behavior brings consequences. Negative behavior brings consequences, and where does that fit into the Buddha's teaching on forgiveness? Am I close?
Yeah, and being accountable.
Okay,
Being held
yes.
accountable.
Being accountable, that's a good way.
Okay, now I understand.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. Uh, I, um, I have some hearing loss in this ear, and then when you're further away from the microphone, I miss things. And believe it or not, sometimes people talk faster than I can process it. So you have to avoid, you might say, being made a doormat. That's definitely, you don't have to be a doormat. You don't have to let people walk all over you. It may be, there's a story about the Buddha, and one of his disciples came to him and said, you know, so-and-so did such and such, and I am so mad at him, and he did yada, yada, yada. And the Buddha just sat there and listened, and finally the guy said, well, aren't you going to do anything? And the Buddha said, if you give me a present and I don't accept it, whose is it? Well, it's the giver gets to keep it. So this is what I saw with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. A lot of times he was a mirror, that he reflected your neurosis right back at you. This requires, first of all, a stable mind and a lot of meditation practice. But if the person that you're talking about, if they're, you don't have to react to their behavior. In relationships, whether it be family relationships, office relationships, factory relationships, it gets to be very ritualized, that someone says something and then you respond in a way that they know you're going to respond in. And then they respond accordingly. For people that are recovering alcoholics, you get together with your former alcoholic friends, they're going to put a huge amount of pressure on you to take a drink. Am I correct here? With family members about other things, again, they're going to want to go into the familiar patterns. It takes a lot to avoid. A good example is you're playing tennis. So your partner serves the ball. Well, a wise Buddhist would just let the ball go right by and not hit it back. Now, this was before I was a Buddhist, but what I did with my parents is I did not go home. It took 29 years between the last time I went home as in my 20s, and then after doing a 3-year retreat, I felt confident that I could go home. but only for a short period of time. Now, Mom kept visiting me because she was very, very, very attached to me. And I didn't invite her, but she came anyway. And it was difficult, but I could handle it in my own house. But, you know, sometimes just getting away is what you need to do. Find, if it's work, you know, try to keep away from that person. Try to have fewer interactions with that person. When it comes to a relationship, children, parents, partners, I'm not so good at that. I was married for 21 years, and then I became a celibate monk. That was, I finally realized I don't understand women. And probably I don't understand men either. But anyway, I hope this helps you. It's a really important question. Did I see another hand, another question? Got another 20, almost 20 minutes. But I can talk about this more.
Thank you for your teaching. I've been talking to a young man who is really concerned about something he did in the past. He really regrets some past actions he did. And he's having a hard time moving on from them. So I've talked to him about the 4 R's, but he's not really a Buddhist yet exactly. So kind of like Vajrasattva, sort of off the table, but he's really concerned about the negative karma that he generated. So do you have advice for, I don't know, what do we do when we worry about the negative karma that we've generated from our past actions?
Okay. I'm glad you asked this because I get to tell another story.
Excellent. All right, I'll sit down.
This is only slightly related, but, you know, so I'm a prison chaplain. I live an hour and 45 minutes away from work. And, well, sometimes I leave home late. And I know I'm going to get there late. There's only one way into the prison. There's not a back door that you can sneak in. And in order to go in, I go by a window that is to the warden's office. Sometimes he'll even wave at me as I go into work. Now, I know I'm going to show up late. I know that he might be in that window looking at me. And so I can worry about being late for an hour and 45 minutes. But I can only be late once. I can only be late once. It's impossible to be late twice on that trip. And so think about that. Now karma's a little different, but still, he's spending all his time worrying about the future, speculating. So this is, in a way, talking about worrying about the present. But think about this when you're having anxiety about what's going to happen in the near future. You know, you can only be late once. Maybe the next time I drive down there, I could be late again. By the way, the warden never talked to me. My supervisor never talked to me about showing up late. Now, as some of you know that has been attending, I sometimes quote people that aren't Buddhist. So I'm going to quote Ogwe, who is in Kung Fu Panda. Yeah, the past is history, the future is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. So have him be more focused on the present. How about that for a lead up? You know, we planned this. And again, that was a good question.
I'm thinking about it. Karma is complicated. But you're right, all we need to do is worry about right now.
Yeah. It is the present where we have the freedom to affect the future. It's only in the present that we can affect the future. That the future is a mystery. And again, this is what I like about Buddhism, is that what it's talking about is it's universal, whether you're a Buddhist or an atheist or a Disney studio writer or a Christian, these things, you know, this is the way it is, if you look clearly. So any other questions? Okay.
Pardon for double dipping. Along the same lines as consequences, where would something like,
Thank you.
the
Thank
amends
you.
process or amends be within like the 4 R's? Is there an amends trying to make right? Or?
Sure. Make amends.
Yes.
Okay.
In the 4R, in relation to the 4 R's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are ways to make amends. This is my own little practice that I have come up with, and it would be so you've harmed somebody. Visualize them in front of you. Do Tonglen and imagine or think about what it was that you did that caused them harm. And imagine that you are, when you're inhaling, that this harm is coming out of them in the form of black smoke. And you're inhaling it, disappearing, because this is a visualization. It's not solid. And then when you exhale, you are giving them the remedy for the harm that you caused. And be creative. You know, this is, again, the beauty of Tonglen is you can get to be very creative. If those people that like to write poetry, write stories, worry about what could happen in the future, that's very creative, I think, also. You know, our minds are constantly creating worlds. So be creative and give them back whatever it is that you might say you took from them by causing the harm.
Thank you, Lama Yeshe. In kind of the same spirit as the Tonglen practice you just described, can you also do it in reverse? Potentially the people that may have harmed you to have some of that same visualization that they're sending you the remedy?
You want something back. I wouldn't, I could not recommend that practice because that's about me. That's about me. What I have done a whole weekend practice or teaching on forgiveness. We've just touched the tip of the iceberg here, but in a complete practice, I would first do a Tonglen about forgiving ourselves, and then the one that I just gave, having others, working with people that we have harmed, and then finally putting our enemy up in front of us. And instead of wanting something back, we are forgiving them. We're giving up our anger towards them, for giving up wanting something from them. Forgiveness, this is an example that I like about forgiveness. Lama Karma was at my center the beginning of May, and I mentioned forgiveness. And, he's Tibetan. Forgiveness, what does that mean? So this is what I told him. Well, you've taken out a loan from a bank, and you have to make monthly payments with interest. And then you get a letter from the bank, and they say, your loan has been forgiven. You don't have to make any more payments. That's forgiveness, forgiving a loan. And so you're telling the other party mentally, you don't go up to them and say, I forgive you, but it's like, okay, yeah, I've been trying to get payments from you with interest, and I'm not going to collect anymore. Does that make sense? Yeah, even Lama Karma got that one. Because he's a homeowner now.
Thank you.
You have a follow-up on that one?
No, thank you.
Okay. If you haven't figured it out by now, I want to stress it really helps to have a light touch and see some humor rather than being serious all the time. Humor is very healing. And if you need to hear a joke, just call me up. Anything else? Well, I'm trying to think of an appropriate joke to end this with. Well, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but what it is about, it's how to ask a question of the Lama. The proper way to ask the question. But this happens to be about a Catholic and a priest. So the man was a chain smoker, and he went to his parish priest and said, Father, is it all right if I smoke when I pray? And the priest said, oh no, my son, that would be a sin. Being a chain smoker, he didn't like that, so he went to another priest in a different parish. And he said, Father, is it all right if I pray when I smoke? And the priest said, "Oh, there's never a bad time to pray." So how about that? On that show, we dedicate the merit. Yes.
It's an old one, but it's fun. And there's a priest, a rabbi, and a Buddhist monk. They go to a hot dog stand.
They go to,
Hot dog stand.
oh, okay.
The priest says, "I want relish." And the rabbi says, "I want mustard." And the Buddhist monk says, "Make me one with everything."
Well, well, Lama Kathy and I and 2 other people went to a synagogue. This is a true story. We went to Newtown after the school shooting. And so a Buddhist monk, the brother of the Unabomber, and a forensic psychiatrist go into a synagogue. That's it? Let's dedicate the marriage. So nam deyi tam che sik pani top ne pedra nam pam che ne ke gana chi balap truk pai si pe so le dro wa shok Jampal Pawo Chitar Kyan Padang Kuntu Zang Po De Yang De Shinte De Da Kun Gi Je Suk Dak Lo Ching Ge Wa Di Dak Tam Che Ra Tu No. Well, that completes this morning. Now we're going to go downstairs and have a feeling we're going to have a wonderful meal. So I will meet you downstairs.